Hi, and welcome to Random Rogers Big Picture for the week of July 13th. Special, oh snap, look at the S&P edition. Weird day on Friday with the S&P 500. Obviously you can look at it a few different ways. Maybe it's great that we came off of that. What was the intraday low? Was it 1226? Whatever the low was, that we came off of that. I guess got positive for a few seconds and then went back lower. I'm probably biased just because I still expect this to play out as a normal bear market. That being said, I don't think that sort of volatility is necessarily a sign of health. At one point during the day, it may have been late in the day, as the market was coming back, I think I heard Dylan on the network say something about getting emails from people, whoever, about that was a sign of capitulation, which you need a little more time for something like that to work out, and if it had come 6 months from now, that would have been a little more capitulatory, if that's a word. But thinking that right here at down 21% maybe, I don't even think it was down 22% for the S&P at the low of the day on Friday. For me, it's tough to think that that's really the sign of a real capitulation. It could turn out to create another feel-good rally. I would never say that that's not a possibility at any time. But anyone thinking it's over, I think, is likely to be disappointed. I wanted to move on to something else, kind of what I think is a rehash, but maybe not. The guys over at Index Universe have had a little discussion breakout on the blogs that Jim and Matt have about research with sectors and assembling portfolios using sectors, and I kind of thought, well, hey, I do quite a bit of that in my writing, and I actually did something for them about that. It was a couple of years ago or so. I'm not exactly sure when, but in the ETF report, which they charge for, I wrote a thing about going sector by sector with portfolios as opposed to cap size or style or whatever. And I kind of wanted to touch on that a little bit to the extent it might be useful, as I think if you're a reader of Index Universe, and you should be, I think the content is great, but if you are a reader of their stuff, I think maybe you're going to see a little more talk in the coming, fill in your favorite time period, about going sector by sector. So just to take an example with the industrial sector, just for no reason in particular. Okay, so if you are building by sector, then you're going to have at least 10 ETFs, maybe more, because there's 10 big S&P sectors. This is how I would think of anyway, is you're going to have at least 10 ETFs to replicate the S&P 500. You would make a decision on each of the 10 about overweighting and underweighting. At least I would. Otherwise, why would you go sector by sector if you're not going to try to add some value? ATV is going by. Love that sound as a full-timer up here. Can't get enough of that. Anyway, wonder what industrial stock he's got built into his bike. Anywho, so sticking with the industrial sector, you could go with something like the sector spider, which I believe is XLI, or iShares has something similar, IYJ, I believe it is. General Electric is very heavy in both of them, and it makes sense. Those are cap weighted, and it's only logical that the biggest one is going to have a disproportionately large weight. If you're going to buy a sector product and one stock has a 15 or 20% weight, I think that's allowed as a cap is 25. But if you're going to, something's got a 15 or 20% weight, you probably need to form an opinion on that company if you're going to use the fund as a proxy. For example, if you go equal weight industrials, for the sake of discussion, you're going to buy 11% then of one of those cap weighteds. Well, if a stock like GE is a 15 or 16% weight, you're not quite 2% of the portfolio in General Electric. It's no different than buying the 2% of the stock. In that light, how could you not have an opinion on the stock? But going a little kind of deeper beneath the surface, there are all sorts of specialty ETFs that I believe, and I've written about this elsewhere, that serve as proxies for certain sectors. The water ETF, PHO, which I own pretty much across the board, is heaviest in industrials. And I think of it as a proxy for part of my industrial sector exposure for clients. Last I looked, it was something like 59% industrial. So it's not overwhelming, to be sure, but it is a proxy for the sector. Another example, sticking with industrials, the iShares Infrastructure ETF, IGF, which I own for a few clients, not as broadly as the PHO, again, is a disproportionately large weighting to the industrial sector, and so you are capturing, for good or for bad, I think you are capturing that sector. The average market cap on those types of things is generally going to be a little smaller than a market cap weighted, sector spider or just generic domestic iShares product. So that's something to keep in mind. But as you build a sector, look under the hood at something. If it's got a large weighting, well, it certainly can be a proxy. There are certain country funds that I believe serve as proxies for countries as well. It's a little further and far between for industrials. I tried to look for one and didn't go down the whole list, but I looked at a couple that I thought might be, like Korea and Japan and no dice. But iShares Taiwan, which I own for a couple of people, that is a pretty good proxy for technology. And for the couple of people that I own it for, in building that spreadsheet that I've mentioned before, where I list all of the sectors and kind of fill in how I'm building the sectors, it is a proxy. And if you are gonna, go sector by sector, don't think that you need to rule out specialty funds. This is very simple work. Just go to ETF Connect or go to the site's homepage, look at the sector makeup, and kind of keep track of what you're doing. Saying, okay, if Taiwan is, I think 53% technology, okay, account for that in your technology weighting. It's probably pretty heavy in financials. I'm guessing off the top that that type of thing fluctuates, so maybe it's close to 20% in financials. Think about that as you build across the financial thing. Weighting in for me, what I use, spreadsheet. Build that way. By paying close attention to that, then what happens is you don't end up with an unintended, lopsided bet on some sort of sector. Then that sector blows up and like I think his name was Mike Fontaine from Mighty Wind, you're not left, what happened? That's the last thing you want to see happen, and that probably occurs to a lot of people who just own actively managed funds. I have a feeling that quite a few folks unattendedly ended up way overweight in financials and really got hit harder than they needed to, just because there's no really maybe that's a bad example. There's no way to manage sector exposure. I think you're going to see more of that from Index Universe. Hopefully it'll be more intelligent than the type of thing I'm articulating, but hopefully it's useful. Have a good weekend.